Now, polling has officially closed in Kenya with counting underway at various voting stations. But 22 million Kenyans registered to vote. The Electoral Commission said it expects a turnout of around 60%. Now, turnout in the last elections was 80%. According to the Electoral Commission, large numbers of young people did not take part in this year's elections. Many say they were fed up with the widening inequality and don't trust either Deputy President William Ruto and veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga. Joining us now on an update on how voting has progressed in the atmosphere since the polls closed earlier is Voice of America Managing Editor for Television, Vincent Makori. Vincent, good evening. Good to have you tonight here on In Focus. I believe voting was, of course, set to close at 6 p.m. However, there were some reports of voting extensions in some locations because the poll stations could have opened late or maybe the biometric kits failed and so on and so forth. Can you confirm if that is the case or have all the stations closed?
Well, good evening. That is correct. There were delays in a number of polling stations exactly for those reasons you've just mentioned, the failure of the biometric kits. But also in some places there was actually a delay in delivering the voting papers, the ballot papers. And because of that, the Electoral Commission making sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to cast the ballot extended the voting time for those polling stations where there were delays.
Will this technical and logistical issue create some kind of political tension? There are some who are already pointing to the fact that these kit failures actually happened mostly in the strongholds of Odinga.
Well, it's very likely that if, say, the results coming in show that the numbers from the areas where those issues kind of happened do indeed disadvantage one of the candidates in the perception of their supporters, it can cause a little bit of tension there. But so far what we're seeing is that later on when those problems are resolved, the process went on smoothly. As we speak now, they have started counting and the numbers are coming in. They're actually releasing, especially the presidential election results. They have gone quite high, almost close to 50%, and it's still too close. Mr. Raila Odinga at the moment appearing to have a little lead, is at 49 point something percent. The other one 48, but it's still too early to really determine who is really ahead. We'll know in the coming hours. But as for the kind of hiccups that characterize today's election, it can lead to some tensions when people start questioning what was behind that, especially come tomorrow, or if at some point the losing person decides, to complain and use those as reasons to lodge a complaint. That can create a little bit of a tension in the country, but it's hard to predict.
If that's the case, do you predict or suspect that that would be followed by protest action or by court action? What's the culture now in Kenya?
Most Kenyans indicate that they're not interested in violence or protests or demonstrations. There might be a few here and there, but by and large, most people say they have no appetite for any form of violence, for any politician. Now, it all remains to be seen, especially once the results come out, because that's when we get to know for sure how people manage to hold in their frustration. But a majority of the people have seen the past elections, have gone through some level of violence, and they really don't think it is something they want to go back to. So it is the hope of many Kenyans that regardless of how this turns out, the country will continue on the peaceful path, and those who lose the elections should accept, and if they have any reason to petition, they can go to through the legal channels and have whatever the issue that is causing them grief be resolved in a more peaceful way than having it resolved on the streets.
Yeah. Of course, as you mentioned, the tally is continuing at this particular point, and we are likely going to get a fuller picture maybe later on in the day. But from observation and from preliminary kind of counting that's happening, did the turnout live up to the 60%?
It looks like it did not. I mean, from what many are saying, the analysts who have looked around, people going around observing, it looks like the turnout was way lower than expected. So we are yet to get the full picture because of, the country is vast in some areas. For some reasons, citizens start voting early in the day. In other places, analysts are saying people come in much later in the day. So from the observation of it, you may get a kind of a distorted image depending on what time you went to the polling station. But once the numbers come in, we'll know the truth. But the general observation up to this point is that the turnout was way lower than expected.
It is essentially a two-man race, a two-horse race, or as they say. I know there are two others who are also vying for the presidential post, but I know we don't mention a lot of them, but a lot about them, shall I say. But Raila Odinga, fifth attempt, I think things turned for him around 2017. He got a handshake from the current president, and he seems to be enjoying a lot of support from the president. The deputy president seemed to be kind of like a third wheel and was left to the side for a little bit. Is this how it's going to play out? Will that work in the favor of Raila Odinga, that he is supported by the incumbent?
In fact, it is not very clear that it will work to his advantage. One has to remember, for example, that while the president endorsed Mr. Raila Odinga, the people from Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta's stronghold, his home ground in the central region of Kenya, around Mount Kenya region, have ended up to a large extent supporting Mr. William Ruto, who fell out with the president. So Raila Odinga, from the polling that were done, did not seem to have done so well, at least throughout the period of the campaigns, in the region that Mr. Uhuru Kenyatta, the outgoing president, comes from. And so people are questioning whether the support by the president necessarily gave him any bump in support. And, of course, Mr. William Ruto, being a very smart campaigner, he literally camped in Mr. Kenyatta's backyard for literally years. And so Mr. Raila Odinga is left with his real home ground, the stronghold in the lakeside region of Kenya, close to Lake Victoria, and then he had to work hard on the other side of the country, like the coastal region, to capture the other areas that are considered his stronghold, and at the same time try to fight for a little bit of a piece of what they're calling the mountain, which is the central part of this country. So in terms of the advantage of getting the endorsement of the president, it's not necessarily clear that it is there, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. In fact, some people thought it's a baggage, especially because Mr. William Ruto cast Mr. Odinga as a project of Mr. Uhuru, and that was meant to really dent any support that he was going to get.
Now, Vincent, what are the political and economic issues either man would need to deal with as they come into office?
Pretty much the same things, levels of poverty. People are, they really are looking for a president who can put in place policies that will help to alleviate their poverty, that will put money in agriculture so that people can have, very productive activities on their farms. But also the younger people are looking for a president who will create job opportunities, and that means growing the economy of this country. There are also other issues like those of health. That is something I've heard over and over, being able to have access to health care in all the corners of the country, because we do have people in this country who don't have that kind of access, who die from very simple diseases because they have no access to affordable health care. So any of those who comes in will have to deal with the same issues. Question is, will he really satisfy the desires of the Kenyans, or will he again be a disappointment come 3 years later, 4 years later?
Vincent, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on. Vincent Makori, Voice of America Managing Editor for Television, with us tonight.